I came with no set kind of agenda. James asked me to come speak, and I think it's a good thing to just talk about where I am now and kind of move backwards a little bit, because it is kind of a neat place to be in now. Maria talked about being a time millionaire, and I think right now I'm a time millionaire because I'm AKA, otherwise known as a ne'er-do-well, maybe. But I've set things up that way, and a bit of it was subconscious, but it's worked out well. And as I look back, I go, wow, that worked out pretty well. And it wasn't a smooth upwards trajectory as I went along. There were some bumps and there were some wrong turns, but if you don't take those wrong turns, you never make the right turns. So I like to just be somebody that takes action, and sometimes it hits you in the face, and other times it works out very, very well. So I think that's something to take with you, is don't be afraid to take action. Don't be afraid to swing the bat, because if you don't swing the bat, you're never going to hit it out of the park. So where I sit now is I own a lot of properties, and the definition of owning a lot of properties is when somebody comes to me and says, how many do I own? Like, I have no idea. Sorry. I can probably take a piece of paper and start to figure it out, but off the top of my head, I have no idea. But I have a bunch of different centers of operation. And is anybody here a fan of Warren Buffett? Okay, Warren Buffett is one of my heroes. And the main reason is because he's just consistent. He's a smart guy, he invests, he does what he does best. And right now, his company, Berkshire Hathaway, is worth billions and billions of dollars. But the interesting thing is, if Warren Buffett dies, it's going to keep going because he set it up that way. And I read something about him recently, and he acknowledged that. He said the reason it works that way is because he invests in good managers. And all of the businesses that he invests in, he doesn't have to manage. He just puts his money there, and he sees good people, and he makes money off of teaming up with good people, because you can't be, all places at all times. So one of the things, it's no joke about not knowing how many properties, but another interesting thing about me is if you put a gun to my head and ask me for the name of one of my tenants, I don't know a single tenant, because I have property managers. Like, I don't want to know my tenants. I don't want to be collecting rents. I don't want them to be phoning me in the middle of the night saying, Ralph, my toilet's stuck. Like, really? I don't care. I need a property manager for that. But anyway, back to Warren Buffett. He's set up his businesses such that he has very good managers, whether it be Coca-Cola or Gillette or whatever business he's invested in. Apple has been one of his best investments ever. And so if he kicks the bucket, these businesses will keep going. Berkshire Hathaway will keep going because he has all these investments in people that know what they're doing, and these businesses are going to keep going. So full circle back to Ralph. Where do I sit now? Well, I have one of these business operations in Sarnia, Ontario. And Jordan, I love Ontario, so keep investing there. I think it's a great place. I started investing there in 2015 in Sarnia, when you could buy a house for 100 grand. And it's funny, I looked at a house listed a few blocks from one of the houses that I have that I paid 100 grand for, and it was listed for 359. So that's what warms my heart. But I met a partner who is smart as a whip. Her dad is a retired police chief. Her mom's a retired nurse. Really good work ethic, really honest. And at the point I met her in 2015, she, didn't know what to do in real estate. She sold her house, and she was kind of hanging out at her mom's house in Sarnia and living in the basement. And I met her at a conference that we were both speaking at. She said, what should I do? I said, well, buy some real estate. Well, do you mind coming out to Sarnia and taking a look with me? So drove out to Sarnia, and we looked at a couple of houses, and geez, $100,000 houses. Like, this is a three-bedroom house with a garage on a 50-foot lot. I'm like, don't be greedy, but I'm like, wow, Katie, these look good. She goes, will you partner with me? I go, okay. So we became 50-50 partners, and subsequently we bought 7 properties. We have a 4-plex, a triplex, a duplex, 4 single-family houses. We had 3 apartment buildings. We sold one of them. We have 2 18-unit apartment buildings. And she's the boots on the ground. We have a very good property manager, but that's like a base of operations that if Ralph gets hit by a bus, it'll keep on operating. And I'll get back to the third apartment that we sold, the apartment building that we sold in a little while, because I have to stay on this thread of the operation. So we've got that operation. We got Sarnia going. Then we have Edmonton going. And we've got this fellow here, James, that I invested with in Edmonton. So we have an apartment building there. I have a couple of condos that are just cash flowing condos. And I'm looking to buy another or partner up with another apartment building this month. So Edmonton is kind of going. We have Adrian, we have James, and just kind of a team that's boots on the grounds in Edmonton. Phoenix, I've done hundreds of units, but most recently I was doing an interesting little project that was Airbnb. So we bought a 7-plex and it just cash flowed like a dam. And then a few blocks, but a few doors away, a 10-plex came available. So we bought that, converted that into an Airbnb. And then a couple of blocks, actually, yeah, about a couple of blocks away, another one came available, a 10-plex. We bought that, converted into an Airbnb. And they were just cash flowing like a dam. And we ended up getting approached with offers that we could absolutely not refuse. Like we bought these things for like $70,000 a door. And 3 years later, they come and approach us and offer us $190,000 a door. So sure, we'll sell. Like it just seemed crazy price. So we liquidated, and now we're looking for another property in Phoenix, but we can't find one because the market's just on fire. So we're kind of just sitting back and looking. But it's kind of a base of operations because my partner Denise down there is really good at renovating and really good at running Airbnb. And we're just kind of cooling our jets and just seeing if something comes along. If it does, it does, doesn't. We got cash in the bank, so we'll just see how that goes. Another base of operations is Vancouver. We've got development property going on in Bowen Island, one in Pemberton, one up near Queen Elizabeth Park on Quebec Street. Got my own house, which was probably one of the best things I ever did, was buy a house in Mount Pleasant in 1994. And so Vancouver is kind of chugging along. Prince George, got a 23-unit building up there with a great partner, Dorothy, that has renovated it and set up all the property management. So that's running like a top. And let's see, what else do I have? Oh, the best one, I saved the best one for last, is Pender Island. And my partner is sitting right here, Paula. And that was a total fluke because I was just sitting around on a cold, wet, dreary November morning last year, and I got a call from Paula, and we were talking about Edmonton, and then she said, "Oh, I don't really mean to say this, but by the way, I've got this place in Pender Island that I just tied up. You interested?" And I said, "Yeah," and went over and looked at it with my wifey, and we loved it, and so we partnered up with Paula, and that one's been a home run. We've had a great time with a waterfront property on Pender Island called Otter Shores. And it's an Airbnb. It's just 3 little rental units on the waterfront with a couple of extra things like a bowler trailer that we imported from Edmonton and a bell tent that we imported from China and various things, but it's commercially zoned and it's just the coolest little property. We've got to get the Mogul team over there one of these days to have a retreat or team building or grape picking or Paula's brother owns part of the winery, the Sea Star winery there. And they have great, easy for me to say, great picking in the fall where you can go and we pick grapes, then we go and drink wine and eat afterwards. But that is, it's an interesting thing that just makes money and it's fun at the same time. And I think that's something we have to keep in mind in real estate is let's do things that are fun, things that we enjoy doing. I don't think I'm ever going to retire. You talk about retirement. I've got freedom of time, but I just love doing deals. If people call me up with deals, I'll always look at the deal because it's just my joy. It's fun to kind of find a deal and figure out how you solve the problem. Everything's a puzzle. There's certain things that you can see in a deal and hopefully you can solve the problem and you can make money. So that's where I am now. How the heck did I get here? Well, let's go back 40 years. I came to Canada. I graduated from Columbia University in New York City with a degree in geophysics. And you try getting a job in New York City as a geophysicist is pretty tough. So back in those days, there was no email, no Instagram, no Facebook. And I had to actually write a letter and put a stamp on it and send it to 2 places, Calgary, Alberta, and Houston, Texas, and say, will you hire me? I'm a geophysicist. And I got 2 letters back, and they said, okay, fly you out. Here's some plane tickets. Come and, we'll interview you and maybe give you a job. So I flew to Calgary and I rented a car. Still to this day, don't know why they rented me a car. So I was like 21 years old or 22 years old. I don't think they do that. Do they rent cars to you when you're that young? But anyway, I rented a car and I drove out to Banff. It's like, oh my God, because I'm an avid skier. I just fell in love with Banff. And I also was very intrigued by the fact that you could drive outside Calgary like 5 minutes and all of a sudden you're in the prairie. Where did the city go? Like, if you're from New York, like the city never ends. You drive from New York, you go to Boston, you go to Washington, like there's city, like constant, like you never see open prairie where you can't see anything. What the hell? But anyway, that really impressed me. So I loved Calgary, went back to New York and flew down to Houston. And Houston is a little bit of a different story. It's super hot. And they actually ended up taking me to a place called Shreveport, Louisiana. And I met some good old boys. And they said, you're a Yankee? And I went, yeah. Felt a little uncomfortable. So I thought, no, let's go for Calgary. So ended up getting a job offer in Calgary, moved to Calgary. Didn't know anybody, but I had my dog. Big black Labrador. So Calgary was booming. This was 1981. Nobody would let you rent a house with a dog because they had, the market was booming. They had lots of renters. So it's easier to rent to somebody without a dog than with a dog. So I owe my whole real estate fortune to Satchmo, my black lab German Shepherd pal that I had since a puppy and who came to Canada with me. But we ended up having to buy a house. So I found a house where they had an assumable mortgage because nobody's going to give a mortgage to a kid that, has no history of employment and, just arrived in the country. So bought this house, had a little bit of a down payment. I think I bought the house for like $85,000. It was in Midnapore, if anybody's familiar with Calgary, which at that point was on the outskirts of town. Now it's like in the middle of town. But I bought that house in about June of 1981 and sold it in November and made $6,000. So my salary as a geophysicist in 1981 was about $24,000. So I made a quarter of my salary on that house in 6 months. And I was like, wow, that's incredible. I am a real estate genius. So I am going to go buy another house. So I went and bought a house out in Pritis, which is about 30 minutes outside of Calgary in the ranch land. But now it's super affluent. If I still had that house, I would not regret it. But times change. Interest rates went to 19%, and wasn't so fun to own a house anymore. And so me and Satchmo looked at each other and like, hey, we're like 30 grand in the hole. Like, this is not good. We couldn't sell the house. We didn't like living outside the city. Like, when you drive into work in the morning when it's 40 below, like your tires feel like they're square. Like they don't really roll on the road. You guys in Edmonton know what I'm talking about. But anyway, Pritis got a little bit old, so had to do something. So basically just pulled the plug and just gave the house back, turned in the keys. Was 30 grand in the hole after being 6 grand ahead, thinking I'm a real estate genius, 30 grand in the hole. So that's really where the story starts, is new to Canada, 30 grand in the hole. Interest rates 19%. This is fun. I love real estate. So the thing that really saved me was the fact that I just had an unconditional confidence that real estate was the thing to do. Like, yes, I had screwed up, but there was not a doubt in my mind that real estate was the way to get to financial freedom and time freedom. So what I did was I went back into Calgary and I bought a house when there was blood in the streets. So the house that I bought at 14th and Center Street for $60,000, me and my wifey, have to give her credit. The interesting thing about the two people that spoke before me, Jordan and Maria and Jerry, was their teams, right? They have a team, and my wifey is a very important part of my team. We went in and she had, she gave me the backing to buy this house, because most wives, after you lose $30,000, are going to say, go on, Ralph, do it again. You did that so well. Let's see you do that again. So anyway, we bought I think it was out of foreclosure from the Bank of Montreal. So in the boom, it had sold for 120. We bought it for 60 and hung in there for a couple of years and sold it for 93. And the reason we sold it was because we just decided we wanted to move to Vancouver. We had had enough of the Calgary winters. My wife's family lived in Vancouver, and we had just had a baby. And so we packed up, and all our friends said, what are you doing? And we were like, well, if we don't go now, we're never going to go. So our kids are going to get friends with other kids, and it's really hard to extricate yourself from a city and move to another city. So we packed up, sold the house, moved to Vancouver, and had about $30,000 equity in our name. And that was a lucky thing. Like the nice thing in Alberta is, I shouldn't say this is a nice thing, but the idea that if you make a mistake on a house, you can just walk away, give the keys, and the $30,000 that you lost, they don't come after you for it. They just say, okay, give us the house back, and you can just move on. So moved on to losing the 30,000, but made 30,000 in the next house, and decided, okay, this is like, I understand real estate cycles now. I've been to the bottom. I've been, at the top, slapped around. It's like, okay, let me out of here. I have my education. Let me go to Vancouver, where things are a little bit more sane, and the market kind of just goes up. This I can deal with. So we moved to Vancouver. My wife went back to UBC. She was a geologist. I was a geophysicist. She went into occupational therapy, healthcare, went to UBC and did a degree there. Me, being the practical guy, so we're selling our house in Calgary, and who do we hire for a realtor? Well, the guy that sold it to us never really kept in touch, so I don't even remember his name. And across the street, a sign went up, and this woman, the sign went up, and the next day there was a sold sticker. I thought, oh, that's pretty good. So why don't you come, look at our house? So she comes, looks at our house, and says, yeah, this is what it's worth, about 96,000 or whatever it was. And so we listed it with her, and she sold it in a day. Boom. So we're sitting in the kitchen. I said, okay, so you sold the house across the street, sold this house in 2 days, and the commissions are like 6,000, which was a lot of money back in 1980. This was 1986, I think. And so, how do you do it? He goes, oh, well, I just got back from a week in Thailand, or not a week, a month in Thailand. And, this is kind of the realtor lifestyle. I thought, okay, that's what I want to do. Forget geophysics. I want to be a realtor. So when I came out to Vancouver, I took the real estate license. My wife went back to UBC, and literally didn't know anybody, and just decided that I'm going to make it happen because I have a passion for real estate. Obviously, I made $6,000. I've lost 30. I made 30. This is fun. It's like there's a pulse to this business. So came to Vancouver, got the real estate license. We lived out at UBC in family housing. We had another child, so we had 2 kids, very rambunctious. My wife was going to school with one of them, Jeffrey. Russell kind of spent time with grandma or ran around with me. And I just looked at real estate and I said, man, I've got to figure out a way to buy. And my first strategy was to find joint venture partners. I had a guy, Mike Sullivan, that I met, and we bought 3 properties, and he would renovate them. I would find them, throw my real estate commission into the deal as half of my down payment back when the house was $180,000, which seemed like a lot of money back then. And I think that's something to emphasize is even now with expensive prices, just understand it. even 20, 30 years ago, it seemed expensive. So real estate always seems expensive. You just have to figure out a way to make it work. And usually there's a way to make it work. Even today, when a house is $1 million or $1.5 million, the rents that you can get justify that based on today's interest rates. So, when I was buying these houses in the late 1980s, early 1990s, interest rates were 12%, 10%. Like I never dreamed interest rates would ever get to 5%. 5% seemed like unbelievable. And so when they started going to 4%, 3%, 2%, it's like, oh my God, it's like heroin, give me more money. But I'm at the stage where I should correct that. Like you got to get to a point where no, debt is not good, no matter how low the interest rate is. So tempting, but no, I'm not going to take that pile of cocaine over there. No. I have to be risk averse. But back to Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett says that these interest rates are like, it's like zero gravity. Like he's just going crazy. He used to make money like back in 2008 when Goldman Sachs went under. He made a lot of money because he had cash and he, offered it to Goldman Sachs. But these days he's saying, if you're young and aggressive, this is the time to be borrowing at these crazy, ridiculous rates, not to be lending. So for what it's worth. So don't be afraid of big price tags. Just think about what your overall strategy is and ways to make it a cash flow machine. But back to my story. Okay, so we're at UBC. I met this guy, Mike Sullivan. We're buying property. So we bought a property on 12th Avenue. We bought one on Ontario Street. We bought a third one. I'm trying to remember where it was. Oh, it was up on, where was that one? This is bad. I can't remember the houses we bought. But we bought 3 houses and we did really well on them. One of them he wanted out of. I just refinanced it. So I hung on to the house, and that was a great move because he just liked the instant injection of making $20,000 or $30,000 a house. I thought more buy and hold. So we would buy a house, renovate it, it would go up in value, and you just get it reappraised. And instead of pulling out the equity, I just said, here's your equity. I'm going to hang on to the house. And that worked out well. I ended up with about 4 or 5 houses in Vancouver. And how much time do I have?
Thank you.
Yes. I just wonder.
I'll give you another 10.
Another 10? Okay. So this is a funny one. So houses in Vancouver. So I ended up owning about 5 houses in Vancouver. And the best way to make money in those days with a house in Vancouver was as a rooming house. So I would buy a 3-story house and rent it out by the room. This was before Craigslist, when you actually had to put an ad. Don't you yawn when I'm talking. Jordan out in Ontario, you're allowed to yawn because it's probably like 11 p.m. or something. But James can't yawn. Anyway, so bought houses, rented them out by the room. And the interesting thing about houses is that when you rent out a house to 6 people, they're a little bit off. They're a little bit, interesting people. There's a reason they're living alone. So they have problems with things like, deciding what they should be watching on TV, what should be in the kitchen sink, who's supposed to sweep the floor. And so, I sort of got used to dealing with the little bit off people, 6 people in a house. And then you buy the second house, then you've got 12 people. And, they're a little bit off. And, okay, this is something that really annoying me because they're calling me a couple of times a week. Then you buy a third house and you have 18 people like this. It's like, okay, this, I'm barely hanging on now. And then at about 3 a.m, my wife and I are asleep at home. I'll never forget this event. Knock on the door, bunk, bunk, bunk. And of course, I'm sort of a deep sleeper. So unfortunately, it was my wife that answered the door and not me that answered the door. And it's a policeman, Mrs. Case. Yes. Do you own the house at 1112 East 10th Avenue? Ralph. So I come out, talk to the police officer, and my tenants are making a bit of a ruckus over on East 10th Avenue. And yeah, I'll get it fixed, no problem. Yep. Good night, officer. Good night. Yeah, I'll take care of it. I don't think they do that still these days. They come and knock on your door when your tenants are making a ruckus, but happened to me. And so that was the end of my career with rooming houses. My wife said, "You're going to sell those houses." I'm like, yes, dear. Yes, dear. And there's a good thing about this and a bad thing about it. So the bad thing is that, if I still own those 3 houses, they'd be worth conservatively $6 million. And that was like 20 years ago. So just the mortgages would have been paid off. That wouldn't have been too bad. But the good news is that once I sold those houses, I started getting into apartment buildings and sort of a different chapter, which I'm going to get to now. But the other thing was it taught me that, property management is so critical because we get caught in the day-to-day horribleness of real estate when we're managing it ourselves. And we lose sight of the fact that the real way you make money in real estate is not from being a property manager. It's from the appreciation and the cash flow. So if you get people to do that property management, and a real estate speaker a long time ago taught me this concept, then you can multiply your business. Because if you're doing the property management yourself, there's only a finite amount you can grow it. If you start to get property managers, then you can grow an unlimited amount. And the interesting thing is that you just build it into the cash flow. So if a house doesn't make sense with a property manager, I won't buy it. Some people say, well, this will work if I do it myself, and it's like $200 a month, but that's a pretty caca job for $200 a month to have to put up with all the caca that a tenant gives you. So I would rather find a house where, and also identify a good, reliable property manager or someone that will be my boots on the ground. Then I will buy the house, and it just has to be part of the equation. But I will not manage it. I do not want to know the names of my tenants. I just want to know the money's going in the bank and everything is, working according to plan. So that was the good thing that I learned. Don't be a property manager. If I had just hired a property manager for a couple $100 a month for each house, or even $500 a month for each house, that's let's just say conservatively, I paid $1,000 a month for property management times 12 months. So that's $12,000 times 20 years is 30, let's call it $40,000. So I invest $40,000 to make $6 million. I probably should have invested that $40,000. But I have no regrets because I learned the idea of apartment buildings. And so I started investing in apartment buildings. And the thing with apartment buildings is it's all about net operating income. And it's about the concept of the multiplier effect. So the way net operating income works in an environment where we'll just pick an interest rate of 6%, you can buy a building at 6%. Every dollar of rent that increases basically is a $200 increase in the value of the property. So if you go into a building and you can find 10 vacancies, and the vacancies are $500, and you rent those 10 units at $500 a month, that gives you $5,000 extra per month income, which pretty much goes to the bottom line because your taxes are the same, and the heat doesn't really change that much whether you have the tenant in it or not. You still have to keep it heated, blah blah blah. So that works out to $5,000 a month, and then you take that for the year. That's about $60,000 that you increase the income, net operating income for your apartment building in a year. Now, at 6% cap rate, which is the rate of return for the building and what a buyer will pay for a building, that increases the value of your building by $1 million. So 10 units, $500 a month, or say you have 100 units and they're under rented and you increase the rent and you make an extra $5,000 a month, or you do some changes or you put in a new suite, anything like that, that increases the income by $5,000 a month. If it's 6%, you increase the value $1 million, that's the 200 to 1 ratio I was talking about. as the cap rates go down, it gets even sweeter. Like at a 4% cap rate, if you increase it by 60,000, I think the figure is 1.5 to $2 million. I'd have to get my calculator, but it gets better and better the lower the cap rate. So in this environment we are now, it's mind-boggling. So I took this concept and went to Phoenix and did very, very well in Phoenix. We bought buildings. I think, oh gosh, probably 8 or 9 buildings since 2012, between 2012 and 2020. And with this multiplier effect and the fact that Phoenix was booming and cap rates were going down, we were buying buildings for $4 million and selling them for $9 million. Buying them for $5 million and selling them for $13 million. It's just insane. And it's all going back to, thank God would have been nice to still have houses in East Vancouver, but the lessons of getting property management, learning how to put together joint ventures, and this idea of the multiplier effect and what I call forced appreciation. So I look at a deal, I don't say, okay, I'm going to buy this deal and I'm going to pay off the mortgage and just, hang on to it forever and be happy. Like that's a good thing. But even more important is I look at it and say, okay, here's a deal. And by bringing the rents up to market rent or filling vacancies or fixing up suites, switching it to Airbnb, something like that, there's a way I can do forced appreciation where I can get the value of this building to go from $2 million to $3 million or $4 million or something within a couple of years. And that really gets me excited. I don't know about you guys, but it's kind of just, expanding the horizons. So in terms of a lesson for tonight, I think an important one is just think about how to, expand your horizons. How can you look at a deal and say, how can I make this deal something that is a real winner? And, I can do forced appreciation, make it way better than it is right now. But worst case scenario is, maybe if it stays the way it is right now, it's a decent investment. So I always like to have the backdrop that it's slow and steady and good to begin with, and then I can probably take it to the next level. So you won't see me going out, and buying something that is negative cash flow or something that is just a bad investment and hoping to make it a good investment. Like I want something that's solid, and then something that I can add a little bit extra that takes it to the next level, which I call this multiplier effect. So that's basically what I've been doing for the last 40 years in a nutshell, straight off the cuff. Did I leave anything out? All you guys in Ontario, thank you for staying up. You guys in Edmonton, stay warm. It's cold there today. Well, it's wet out here, boy. Don't try driving here because I don't think you can't go down at I-5. We can't go out at I-3. The only way out of here is by boat.
Yeah, I saw it flying over it on the way today. It's not pretty up there.
Okay.
Well,
I will. Any questions?
Or any questions from Vancouver? Our tech setup online is not super good, so let's take one question in Vancouver and then maybe call it.
Okay.
Yeah, you were talking a lot about forced appreciation. So does that mean that you live your properties or do you just hold them?
Okay, so the question was, I talked about forced appreciation and do I flip my properties or just hold them? So my strategy is to hold them forever unless I get an offer that I can't refuse. So case in point, I said I'd circle back to Sarnia. We bought a building in 2016, Durand Apartments, and it was 32 units, bought it for $2 million. And all we did was hunker down and every time a tenant moved, we would renovate the suite and increase the rents. And so 2015 to the year 2019 was pretty good in Sarnia. Like it was growing steady. In Ontario, you can't increase the rents more than I think 2% or 2.5% per year, similar to BC. So we just every year we would increased the rents the minimum amount. And out of these 33 units, only about 6 changed hands in 4 years. It was amazing. But of those 4 that changed, we would increase the rents from like $600 a month to $900 a month. It was, significant rent increases. And we had some crazy things happen. We had fires. We had a man that locked himself in his room. We had a woman that had a boyfriend that was fencing stuff and like stealing stuff out of people's cars and storing them in her apartment. And the police came and knocked the door down. This is when it's good to have a partner that's the daughter of the former police chief. So you can pick a partner. Those are good ones. Katie. But anyway, out of the blue, my realtor who sent me this deal and really was a gem in helping me buy this deal, because I was in Vancouver and this building was in Sarnia, and I had to fly several times to Sarnia to do my due diligence and buy it. But he called me up and offered me to, that he had a buyer. I said, I want to sell it. This building is going great. Every time a tenant moved, we would, most of the tenants paid their own hydro, but there were a few that didn't. And when they would move and start paying, the new tenant would start paying their hydro. It was like $200 turnaround in a month. Like, it's just great. So we just loved this building, and it was just starting to run smoothly. But this was fall of 2019, before COVID. He called me up and said, "Oh, you want to sell it?" I go, "No." He goes, "Well, I'll give you 3.3 million. We had paid 2 million for this in 2016. I said, "Really?" I said, "If you will pay that, I will sell it." Sure enough, he came with an offer of 3.3 million. And they did their due diligence, and they came back and they wanted to give me a haircut, which is AKA, that's when they come back with your offer and say, "Well, it's 3.3, but we'll remove subjects if you give it to us for like 300,000 off because the roof needs fixing and blah, blah, blah." I said, "No, I told you when you bought it that it needed a new roof and the elevator needs service, so I'm not budging, I'll hang on to it." And they came back at 3.3 mil. So after realtor fees and blah, 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 we made a cool $1 million in 4 years. And, to answer your question, I didn't want to sell it, but, sometimes when that forced appreciation, you come in and make an offer you can't refuse.